everybody, this is Alexis speaking for this webinar this lunchtime on setting up for success in your mentoring relationship. So I'm just going to talk a little bit for the next couple of minutes as people arrive into the webinar. But the first thing to do is to check in with you that you can hear me okay, and you will see in the bottom right hand corner of your control panel that there are a little section called questions and chat. And in the questions section, what would be helpful now, just to make sure that you can all hear me okay, is if you just say hello and let me know whether you're a mentor or a mentee or both, in fact, just so that it gives me a little bit of an idea who we've got listening to this webinar today. So if you could do that for me and just start typing in perhaps into the little questions area in the right hand corner, just a hello, or let me know whether you're a mentor or mentee. Just give you a couple of seconds to do that. Okay. So I'm not getting anybody type that in, which makes me worry that you can't hear me at the moment. Can I just ask the Academy people whether you can hear me okay?
Hi, this is Kat from the Academy. Yes, we can hear you fine, and we also can see people replying to say whether they're mentors or mentees.
Brilliant. Okay, I can't see that then. So if you could just give me permission over the questions area, then I can keep an eye on that as we move along. That's brilliant. Excellent. So people can hear me, and that's great. Okay, so as I say, my name's Alexis, and I'll be sharing with you information and ideas with respect to this subject, and I will give you plenty of time for questions at the end. So I won't answer questions as we're going along, simply because there's quite a lot of material and ideas I want to share with you along the way, and I have given a lot of time for questions at the end. So keep them going as they occur to you. Put those questions into that little section so that I can work with them at the end, and you don't forget about questions or observations, in fact, that you have along the way. So that's the introduction with respect to the webinar. I just want to get the next slide up for you, because I just want to tell you who I am and why it is that I'm sort of delivering this webinar for you today. So it's useful for you to understand this and know where I'm coming from, and understand why I have the ideas and the opinions that I have with regards to what makes a successful mentoring relationship. The reality is I have my own independent practice as a coach and mentor, and I do work exclusive with doctors, medical doctors that is, and I've been doing this for over 10 years, and prior to that I worked in medical education. I spend 50% of my time doing that on a one-to-one basis, but the other 50% of my time I do work with groups and teams, probably mostly around leadership and management and those kinds of career development things. But actually I'm the scheme trainer for an awful lot of organisations that run mentoring schemes. So I've run hundreds of these mentoring programs and trained mentees and mentors up over the years. So I've got lots of ideas and opinions about what I think works with respect to people making a successful go at having a mentoring relationship. The most important point to make about that is that in both my individual work and my group work, I give people time to think. So that's what I want to do with you during this webinar, is give you time to think about becoming a mentee, becoming a mentor, or both, and how to make a success of it. So this webinar, it is about setting up for success in your mentoring relationship, but what I've done is I've organised this into 4 broad categories that I think represent the main areas of consideration when you're embarking on a mentoring relationship, and of course setting it up for success. Obviously, we don't have an enormous amount of time with each other this lunchtime, so I can't dive in too deeply into these subject areas, but hopefully it will give you food for thought. And I have got some links in the actual slide deck that will allow you to go to the Academy website and find out some more information and do perhaps a little bit of additional research. So this first area, who to work with and how. I want to share with you my thoughts about who you might want to nominate as a mentor, because I know some of you are right on the cusp of doing that at the moment, and who therefore you might want to work with as a mentor or as a mentee if you're coming to this from a mentor's perspective, and therefore what kind of mentoring would work best for you. Secondly, I want to talk a little about the importance of building and maintaining trust in the relationship, because of course that's crucial for its success. Thirdly, I want to talk about the rules of engagement and the boundaries for how you should work with each other. And lastly, I want to share with you some ideas about how to manage your expectations and some thoughts about goal setting. So who to work with and how. So the first question that might arise for you is, who would be the best person to work with, particularly if you're one of those mentees and you're in the position of now thinking about who to nominate as a mentor. However, before you tackle that question, that is who to nominate, I think it's just worth exploring what mentoring should really be about in order to inform that decision about who you would best work with. So at a very basic level, of course, it's one person supporting another to realise their potential. But this is a great little picture to just think about that a little bit more. We've got one creature, whatever they are, strange rabbits, I think. What the hell is that? And the other creature saying, oh, that's just my mind. And for me, this picture helpfully illustrates the realities of both coaching and mentoring, and equally the potential of how this one-to-one developmental opportunity might work, because this tangled cacophony of stuff that we're carrying around in our heads, those thoughts, those hopes, those fears, those assumptions we're making about ourselves and others, are always, of course, peculiar and individual to ourselves and always utterly fascinating. But what mentoring can help you do is really detangle and understand all of those thoughts that you have and help you organize and prioritize them so that you know what needs to be done. So actually, the first question you should be actually asking yourself is, what do I want to achieve as a mentee? And what do I want to understand about myself as a part of this process? Because if you start to interrogate yourself about what you want to get out of this mentoring opportunity, that can give you really useful insights into who it is you should be nominating. It helps you identify more clearly who the great mentor might be for you. Second picture, getting the best out of people. So it's worth remembering that mentoring is quite unlike other kinds of learning experiences that you might have had during your sort of professional life, because it's not simply about getting advice and guidance or simply having information shoveled into you. It's actually much more about the drawing out of learning from you as a mentee and the experience of thinking about your ideas and exploring your thoughts. So it's much more of a drawing out of learning rather than simply the shoveling in of information. And that's quite important to remember, that because it can feel quite different to your normal conversations that you might have with a supervisor or a boss or an educational supervisor, that kind of thing. But it's also worth remembering that actually your expectations and your assumptions about your career might be influencing your ideas about this mentoring relationship too, because often we have this idea, we have this idealistic notion that our careers should be like this top little cyclist here, that my plan, my career should be relatively straightforward. You know, if I work hard, if I do what I'm setting out to do, then actually I should get what I need to do. I should be able to face my career, and I should move through it relatively straightforwardly. But of course, the reality is this bottom picture, and all of these challenges and obstacles that we have to face are the reality of our experience with respect to our professional lives. And of course, that builds resilience and allows you to gain experience and insight into yourself and your career in a much richer way than the idealistic notion of how things really work. the point I'm making here with respect to who to work with and how to work with them is that if you start to become clear about who your potential mentor might be based on what you would like to achieve, then actually you can start to be a bit more proactive about these challenges and opportunities that might occur for you with respect to your career. This little link here, it takes you to the Academy of Medical Sciences YouTube video on top tips for choosing a mentor. So I leave it with you there to have a look at a later date so that you can get some additional information on what works well for choosing a mentor. So what kind of mentoring might work for you? It should also influence your decision about who to work with. And here at the Academy, we promote modern developmental mentoring, but it's helpful to juxtapose this against a structured model to emphasize what's really important about developmental mentoring. So if we think about the structured model of mentoring, of course, it has its historical roots in a hierarchical and sort of positional authority culture of mentoring. It's very much based on the patriarchy and the protege setup, whereby a more senior and powerful colleague takes on a younger and more junior member of staff to help shape their career through advice and guidance and the gifting of opportunities. It's very rigid in that respect. But modern developmental mentoring is quite different, and it starts with the assumption that the mentee is leading the learning and that the role of the mentor is to create the environment with the conversation in order that the mentee can do the very best thinking for themselves. What's interesting about this is our ideas about power, though, because the potency of the relationship comes from the power and the nature of the power within the relationship. So in a structured model of mentoring, the power comes from the hierarchical gap between the two person. I'm much more senior, much more powerful, have much more influence than the mentee, for example, or my protege. Whereas the power in a developmental model of mentoring very much comes from the experience and the shared learning, the experience that both parties are exploring with each other in order to create new ideas and to create new options and thinking patterns for the mentee to do the very best thinking for themselves. So it's a much flatter position in terms of the hierarchy, and can take a much more sort of like this flowing river, really. You know, it'll have twists and turns in it, which is much more creative. So with that sort of in mind, really, of who you might want to work with and how you might want to work, and as I say, here at the Academy, we very much promote modern developmental mentoring. Think about who you should work with, who might be useful to you, and why them. What are you hoping to achieve, and how best could this work for you? Here's another little link for you. It's a guide to modern developmental mentoring. It's just a downloadable little worksheet, just a resource that, again, just consolidates perhaps what I'm talking about here with respect to developmental mentoring. So our next section here is the really important one in many respects, is building and maintaining trust. And of course, you're going to have an awful lot of trust if you're going to hug a lion. So with respect to building trust, what's important here is to know that all the research that's out there suggests that it's the quality of relationship, the quality of the bond between the mentor and the mentee that is the most important factor. It is the factor that will give the greatest prediction around success for the mentee, rather than the positional authority of the mentor, or what kind of training they've had, or whether they're in the same research field as you. None of those things matter as much as the actual bonds that you have with each other. So setting off on the right foot is really important with respect to building that and maintaining that trust. It doesn't mean that it has to be all nice and comfy, but it does mean that you have to take care with how you develop that rapport and build trust. getting to know each other by understanding what you share in common, what you have that's different, exploring your values, your hopes, your fears, are all really important ways to create a bond between you. So, as I say, the mutuality of the learning is a really important feature of modern developmental mentoring. And I do encourage the mentors that I train to share with their mentees what they're gaining and what they're learning as a part of this relationship too. It flattens that hierarchy, and it gives you both parties the opportunity to really create that sense of commitment and bond with each other. And of course, as a result of building that rapport, you should experience an authentic connection between each other, and therefore a sense of commitment of how you're going to work with each other. And it should feel energizing. It should feel like a very positive thing that you're working on here. So if you have you've spent the time to really invest in that rapport and that trust building activity, then actually you're in a much better position to get beneath and beyond your usual ways of thinking. We can often get stuck or lost in our thoughts and our decisions about our career. And one of the unique aspects of both coaching and mentoring is the process can help you get beneath your surface thoughts about this topic or this goal and beyond your current expectations about what you could do. This quote helpfully illustrates that. Great mentors provide a stimulating sanctuary in which people can take a helicopter view of their options. It really illustrates the spirit of mentoring when we think about how important it is to have that trust at the very basis of the relationship. It's not saying here that great mentors have to be more knowledgeable, more experienced, more powerful, or more advanced in their career. What it's saying is that we've got a trusting relationship that allows the mentors to really stimulate and stretch your thinking in a safe environment that's a sanctuary from your normal working situation, that allows you to then take a longer view, a greater perspective via a helicopter view, if you like, to really explore all of your options. And your options is the most important aspect there. So I think that quote really illustrates what we're talking about here in terms of the trust and how that can really influence getting beneath and beyond your normal ways of thinking. But of course, a part of that and a part of really doing the very best thinking for yourself as a mentee is you'll feel vulnerable. You know, it is intimate with respect to the relationship and how trusting that you need to be with each other. But you will feel vulnerable because potentially you're sharing things here that you've not had the opportunity to think about with other people before or say out loud, and it's really important that you're able to do that in this conversation. So the next little section is called contracting and boundaries, and of course this is a really important part of developing the mentoring relationship. It creates that firm foundation. And of course, we recommend that both of you, both mentors and mentees, talk about and jointly agree the basis of how you're going to work together with respect to this relationship. The word contracting can feel a little legalistic. I can't even say it. But it's there to simply describe the rules of engagement that need to be negotiated and agreed between you both before you get on and start your mentoring relationship and program with each other. I think these three areas broadly capture what I think the contracting part of the relationship and the process should look like. So the first one, the purpose of the relationship. Of course, this is very much attached to the purpose and the goal for the mentee. But equally, there could be aspects of development for the mentor that could be a part of this contracting process. So the mentor might be coming to this relationship really wanting to develop their listening skills, for example, or really wanting to develop a part of their professional practice that allows them to help people with specific aspects of their careers. So if you can share those things with each other, it really helps consolidate how this is going to work for you both. Equally, obviously, you should be talking about what topics are open for discussion and what the boundaries are about this relationship. It can really help you stay focused and purposeful, because as you become more familiar and more intimate with each other, it's easy to get distracted and off topic sometimes. So staying on track is quite important with this. Obviously, you need to talk about the practical arrangements and how often you're going to meet and where will you meet, and whether distance mentoring is the thing that's going to work for you here. So, you know, all of those kind of pragmatic arrangements should be discussed at this point. And here at the Academy, if you're listening to this webinar and you're going to be a part of one of our programs and this mentoring scheme, then, you know, we typically advise, if you're going to set up a relationship with your mentor, then ideally it should last for about a year. And ideally you should be aiming for perhaps 4 to 6 meetings in that year that last about an hour long. Of course, you need to negotiate that. And of course, there will be particular differences that you need to sort out with the person you're working with. But that gives you some sort of broad idea as to what might work with respect to our scheme, if you like. You also might want to do this contracting stage in an initial chemistry meeting. This isn't like speed dating, but it does give you the opportunity to perhaps have a chat on the phone or a coffee with somebody before you fully commit to working with that person in a mentoring relationship. And it gives you that opportunity to get a feel for how you might work and what the sort of the constraints might be or the opportunities might be for working with each other. I've got another little Academy link for you here. Again, it's a downloadable resource, but it gives you some additional ideas around this contracting phase, and it's got some lovely questions there that you could ask of each other that help you really explore how to set up this relationship. So boundaries, let's talk about boundaries because it's quite important here. It's really important to remember this is a professional relationship, even though it might feel quite intimate at times, but it isn't counselling. Let's be clear about that. It's quite different. So whilst you might well become quite friendly and comfortable with each other, I always encourage the mentors to really remain impartial or neutral, because that helps them maintain that objectivity in the conversations. It allows the mentor to remain at a slight distance from the mentee, and it allows them to create that very objective and rational space for you to do your very good thinking in. If you get too close with each other, if it's too friendly, then you can get contaminated by all of the contents and perhaps the emotional aspect of things, and that becomes much less useful for people. So you may also want to have this conversation with respect to boundaries in your chemistry meeting. And you might also want to think about, you know, well, we might have these 4 to 6 meetings over the course of a year, but are we going to be okay with meeting each other outside of that, at conferences, for example, or at Academy events? Or are we okay with emailing each other in between meetings? Is it okay for the odd phone call? All of these things are up for negotiation between you both and what feels right for this particular mentoring relationship. However, with that in mind, it's really useful to think about the kinds of topics that mentees typically bring to a mentoring relationship. The top one, managing careers or careers, you might have a couple there, academic and clinical, is in green, because that's the kinds of things that people often feel very comfortable talking about. It's kind of, it feels valid. Yeah, I'm here to talk about my career and my professional development and the networks that I need to access and the grants that I need to apply for and how I get on to become a, you know, a professor or whatever it is that you're particularly working on. That feels a legitimate thing to talk about. And of course, that's probably why you've come to mentoring. But equally, these other areas are managing our professional relationships, the people stuff, dealing with conflict, handling perhaps a difficult supervisor, the day-to-day management of our relationships with other people at work is also a crucial aspect of our ability to manage our careers. And it's the stuff that we might feel a little more hesitant about talking about. Equally, we might feel a little bit hesitant to talking about managing our well-being, our work-life balance, our family commitments, all of the stuff that we have to do as humans as well. And the reason that they're in red is because people can feel a bit inhibited about talking about those things, but they're playing a big part in our lives. And so I urge you to talk with your mentor about those aspects of your life and how they are interplaying with your ability to manage your career. So it's interesting for you to think about how comfortable you are about talking about all of those topics, and how legitimate it is with the person that you're going to be working with. And of course, it takes us right back into the trust piece, is how much do I trust this person that I'm working with to be able to talk about all of this stuff. And equally, that might be the case for the mentors too. You know, you might want to talk about your own challenges of work-life balance with bringing up a family, and that might be a useful experience for you to share with your mentee. So think about that and the boundaries around what feels comfortable and what feels right for you within this relationship. So the last section that I've got here is about managing expectations and goal setting, which is really quite important, of course. This is a great little advert from Shackleton trying to get folk to sign up for his expedition. Men wanted for hazardous journeys, small wages, bitter cold, long months of complete darkness, constant danger, safe return, doubtful, honour and recognition in case of success. I love the honesty and the explicit nature of that advert. And of course, people did sign up. Perhaps it was the excitement and the adventure, perhaps they needed to leave the country fairly quickly, but they did in safe knowledge that they knew exactly what they were signing up for. And the same is true for mentoring, is that making sure that you both know when you're having that chemistry meeting or that first session what you're signing up to do here, and perhaps using that resource on the Academy website with respect to contracting, of really talking about all the features that make developmental mentoring what it is, and the contract aspects and the boundaries aspects that allows you to really get off on the first from the first base on the right footing, and it allows you to make sure that you both know what you're signing up for with respect to this mentoring relationship. In addition to that, I think it's reasonable to expect some behavioural stuff from the mentor for the benefit of the mentee. So with respect to attention, the focus of attention should be 100% on the mentee and shouldn't be distracted or diluted from that. It is all about you, the mentee, and you should be leading the learning. So this is why it's different to having a chat with a mate or a colleague at work, where you bounce between both of your agendas and experiences at work. This is really about your experience and what you're working on as the mentee, and that's where the attention should be. Equally, the appreciation for the mentee from the mentor and all that you are going through, that really strengthens the trust piece and allows you to be really honest and open with your thinking. Equally, of course, empathy, that empathetic approach, you know, to the emotional part of people's thinking is incredibly valuable, and feeling that somebody is empathizing with you is a really important part of this experience. And of course, respect for each other from both parties is incredibly important for you both. So I think it's worth referencing those expectations for you, so that you know that the culture of this relationship is very much rooted in attention, appreciation, empathy, and respect. And also, I think in terms of managing your expectations, it's important to remember these two key aspects. For the mentor, It's their responsibility to look after what's happening within the mentoring conversation. They need to make sure that they're setting the right conditions, the right atmosphere, the right level of trust, so that you as the mentee can do the very best thinking for yourselves. They're not going to take away any actions or do any work other than what actually happens in the mentoring conversation. For the mentee, it's your job to do something about what you've talked about between now and next time. So at the end of each mentoring conversation, it's really useful for you to make a list of things that you're agreeing to take away between now and next time. It is about putting the learning into action. It's not a theoretical exercise here. It's not about having a nice chat with somebody really interesting every couple of months or whatever it is. This is about actually putting stuff into practice so that when you go and meet with your mentor the next time, progress is being made. And if progress isn't being made, you then have the opportunity to talk about why that is. So goal setting, of course, you know, I don't want to sort of overemphasize goal setting too much, because I think we live in a professional environment that is governed by goals and outcomes and measurements, and I you know, I'm a bit frustrated by that, and I think I wouldn't want to apply the same heavy-handed approach to mentoring. However, it is important that you have a purpose and a goal for this mentoring, and it is important for you to think about how clear that purpose is. So this is the question really: is your goal or purpose for mentoring clear? So for example, you might think that your purpose for mentoring is quite obvious to you at this point. You might think that it's relatively straightforward. There's going to be obstacles. I need to learn about stuff, but I know where my pathway's going, and I know where it's taking me to, and I know what I've got to overcome, and I just need some guidance and some thinking, some help with my thinking around that, and what I need to tackle. So it might be relatively straightforward to you. But equally, you might have been on a pathway that has provided you with a clear route to date, but you might now be facing a much more ambiguous future. And I think that can happen, of course, a lot with scientific research careers, whereby developing a goal or a purpose might take time, and it might take one or two sessions for you to really consolidate what your goal is, and both of those options are fine, but it's useful for you to know up front where you stand within that purpose or that goal for your mentoring. Equally, it's important to recognize that actually, as you embark on this exploration, as you embark on really stretching your thinking, you might gain, hopefully, new insights, and you might need to make adaptations to your goal. So actually, it might be clear to you at the moment, but you might actually need to loop back around and reevaluate and make some adaptations that allow you to rewrite your goal. Something for you to think about. This link here links you to a resource, again, on the Academy website, which gives you a really useful downloadable sheet, which is on the Oscar model, which is a way of staying on track with regards to your goal-orientated development. And it's listing a set of questions that allow you to stay on track with regards to allowing you to really craft and form your goal. So that might be something that's worth looking at for you. So this is a question for you to consider with respect to where you're going with regards to your career. Why are you doing it? Why are you doing it? And how could mentoring help you? So really think about your horizon line and where you're going with your career, and how could this mentoring help you. Don't do that now because we're still working together, but think about that question and let it mull over as you embark on your mentoring journey. I think it's important to do this for both mentors and mentees, actually, because there will be a reason that mentors are doing this, and it's useful for you also to identify what that might be. So here's my last but one slide then. So steps to setting up for success in your mentoring relationship. Now, before I say what those steps are, I just want to say these words to you because I think they're quite important. Remember that learning is rarely straightforward. In fact, learning is usually a messy business. So it's not going to be a nice, straight, clean line that we imagine that learning should be. It's going to be a messy, tangled affair. So with that in mind, be clear about your purpose and keep coming back to it, reflecting on it and checking in with it about whether it's right for you and whether you need to make some adaptations. Value the sessions. This is a golden opportunity for you to really invest in your development and seize the opportunity for maximizing it and doing something for the mentees, doing something as a mentee between one session and another. As I say, take on the task between sessions, because it's actually when you take this stuff back into the workplace that actually you really put your learning into action. Reflect on your learning and raise your awareness. Notice stuff about yourself, notice stuff about other people in the workplace, and how is that playing into your sense of development and your own awareness of yourself. But pace yourself, be kind, recognize it takes time to embed learning, and it's not going to be an immediate result that you get with respect to your development and achieving your goals. So that brings us to the end of the actual delivery part of this webinar, and I deliberately did that so that it would take about 35 minutes, giving us the opportunity to really work with your questions and your observations so far. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just scan down this little questions list, and that's all the questions saying, hello, I'm a mentee, hello. So let's just have a look. So I'm going to work back with these. So what should I do if I don't click with my mentor? That's a really great question. Thanks for asking that. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes we can feel really worried about whether it will work or not, because the chances are this is somebody that you really don't know at all well, and it's fair to say that most people are a little bit anxious before they meet their mentor or mentee that it might not work. I have to say, after all the years of doing this and all the workshops that I've run with mentors and mentees, the chances are it will work, because if you're both coming at this and you invest in the time to build trust and develop your contract with each other, then even though you might be very different people, you're invested in making this work from the right purpose. So don't think that it's common for it not to work, but sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you might not click for whatever reason. Sometimes the pragmatics of the geography between you also mean that it might not work. And what I would say to that is, please do come back to us at the Academy. Let us know so that we can help you sort out a new mentoring relationship. We have a no blame divorce policy here at the Academy, and you're not going to get that opportunity anywhere else. So I think that's a good thing for you to bear in mind, but be open-minded. Another question, as a mentee, should I plan a structured session for my first meeting? Yeah, good question. Well, I think we're all different. I think we all have our preferences about how we like to organise our thinking and how we like to get to know people. I think it's useful for the first meeting to have a structure around the contracting aspect of things, so that you know how this relationship is going to work with each other. And you might have a clear agenda for yourself around your goal and what you want to talk about. So it might be useful for you to make a note of that. And it might even be useful for you to email that in advance to your mentor, so that gives them a heads up. Equally, though, you might actually just want to arrive at your first meeting and just download and just really explore your thinking. And I think both of those things are valid. different people think out loud, different people organize their thoughts in different ways. And I think it's useful for you to know that about yourself and to let your mentor know what kind of a learner you are and what, you know, what would work for you. What else have we got? Oh, I'm just scanning down here. Is it a good idea to have a formal signed contract or let this develop as we go? Yeah, it's a good question, actually. I don't really know of any mentoring schemes anymore that ask people to actually sign a document per se. It doesn't really achieve anything, and it's not going to be checked on by anybody, and it certainly isn't going to bind you legally to anything. The mere act of signing it, I suppose, could confirm that you both agree, but I don't think it's necessary. And I think it's the conversation that is created by looking at a contract or a set of contracting questions that's the most important thing. Does the Academy and Alexis, do you offer consulting services to help communities of practitioners to set up mentoring program? Yes, so actually that's a great question, because one of the things that we do at the Academy every year is a session called the Catalysis session, and this year it's on the 29th of September at the Academy of Medical Sciences in London. If you go to the Academy website, you can sign up to attend this free and open access half-day workshop that really allows you to think about developing your own mentoring scheme, or think about, you know, a mentoring program for the people that you're particularly thinking about. So perhaps you might like to email us after that if you want more information, but there is quite a lot on the website with respect to that particular event. I do it every year, and it's a really enjoyable session. What is the evidence that mentoring works? Well, it's quite difficult to answer that question because it's quite a subjective thing to measure. A lot of people's feelings and ideas about whether mentoring and coaching have worked for them are based on their subjective feelings about the person that they were matched with and the kind of goal that they had. And of course, it's subject to all kinds of external factors like getting pregnant or moving jobs or whatever. But there is some evidence that we've got at the Academy, and if you'd like to gain access to that, I'm sure we'd be able to share it with you. The one that I often cite the most often is a piece of research by DeHaan, which was done through the Ashridge Business School in 2012. And that did a global piece of research to look into what the factors were for making coaching and mentoring successful. And that was really what I was referencing earlier, that actually it's the quality of the relationship that really matters rather than the any other particular more technical features. So that's the best way I can answer that question at the moment. Confidentiality is important for the trust in the relationship. Do mentors formally agree on confidentiality when they sign up? Yes, is the straightforward answer to that, and that's part of the contracting thing. You should absolutely be talking about the privacy of the information. It's a kind of cornerstone and anchor of the relationship, and it should be taken very seriously. Of course, there might be one or two situations, perhaps safeguarding situations, where that confidentiality may need to be renegotiated, but I suspect it's unlikely to happen in the situations that we're talking about with respect to your kinds of mentoring experiences. But absolutely, yes. Just going through some of these questions. Should the mentor be someone you don't know yet? Well, I think that's an interesting question, because I think it can be really useful to work with somebody that you don't know, to have a fresh pair of ears and a different kind of perspective. And certainly that's what I would urge you to be doing if you are signing up as part of the Academy scheme. If you know the person that you want to work with, there might be all kinds of conscious or unconscious biases or assumptions or judgments that you might hold about that person that might get in the way of the freshness and the objectivity in the relationship. But equally, I do know of situations where people have known somebody that they really admire and have asked them to mentor them. So I do know it can work, but I think you need to be quite mindful about the pros and cons of that, if that's what you're going to do. Should the mentor be working in a completely unrelated field? I like that question. Well, I think that it can be incredibly helpful if they are unrelated. And I say this because I ran a session at the Academy a few years ago now. And at the beginning of the session, one of the chaps in the audience who is a mentee said, yeah, I've already made my nomination. I've nominated somebody who's in the field that I work in, is specifically interested in the same sorts of research things that I want to be working on, and has already achieved quite a lot of success in that area. So I'm nominating them for that specific reason. And that same person came to me at the end of the session and said, you know what, I've made a mistake. Actually, the biases and the assumptions and the knowledge that they might hold about what I want to do actually could get in the way. And actually what I need is somebody completely unrelated to my field. So they denominated that person and went and got somebody completely different. So again, it goes back to your question of why am I doing this? What do I want to be working on? How might this help or not help me work within my my purpose and my goal? So I just offer that as an example because I think it's useful. Some mentoring relationships may lead to successful project collaborations. What are my views on this? Well, I think that can help, but I think that you need to be clear that if that's what is happening in your relationship, then actually you probably need to suspend or move away from the mentoring relationship when that happens, because then actually you're becoming colleagues and collaborators, and that is quite different. The beauty of a mentoring relationship, it is a sanctuary, and it is different from your current working professional relationships. So that can happen after, but I would suggest that during might be unhelpful. As a mentor, do you suggest doing a wash-up after a relationship to see how you can improve your relationship skills, your mentoring skills rather? Yeah, I think that's really good, and I think that's really good practice for the mentors to be actually asking, perhaps at the end of each session, how did I do? What bit helped? What bit didn't help? Is there anything you'd like me to do more or less of? I think that's perfectly reasonable to be very open about your own learning as a mentor in this relationship. But yes, a wash-up session would be really good. Now, I'm just checking. Okay, here we go. Here, do you have any concrete tips for choosing a mentor? Concrete tips. I think that you should be choosing somebody that you feel as though you might have a good affinity with, that you might be able to really open up and stretch your thinking with. So, for example, if you know that you're somebody who is quite flexible or casual in their organization style and their thinking style, you might want to challenge yourself by thinking, you know what, I need somebody who is very organized and very structured in their style of thinking and mentoring, so that really stretches me and holds me to account and really works with my developmental area to get the very best out of me. So knowing yourself and knowing what you need to work on can give you some really concrete ideas about what you want in a mentor. Now, that might not be obvious from the profile that you might be looking at on a website for who you might nominate, but a chemistry meeting or a phone call or just getting some advice and guidance from the guys at the Academy, from Kat, they might be able to give you some some ideas about who might work well with your particular learning style and what you would want to be working on. So I think it's knowing thyself and thinking about what would work well for you that's really important. I urge you to go and have a look at the little video that I gave you the link for, so that you can have a look and have more think about those sorts of tips for choosing a mentor. What is a realistic goal for a one-year mentorship? Not sure I can answer that really, because they're all so individual for people. And I think in that first session, if you have an idea of a goal, then your mentor should help you really stretch your thinking around that goal and help you really challenge whether it's realistic or not. I mean, I do find sometimes that people actually will be excuse me a moment, unhelpful. I do find that sometimes people set a realistic goal for their year's worth of mentoring, but actually end up achieving it after 6 months and then reset themselves another goal, and that can work really well. Sometimes people are working on what can feel like a very realistic goal for 12 months and not achieve it in 12 months because other stuff has happened that has meant that they've had to make adaptations along the way. So I don't think it's answerable, that question, sorry. I think it really depends on the person and their particular circumstances. Just having a look at some of these questions. Can a successful mentoring relationship be extended beyond a year? Yes. I think you have the opportunity to negotiate with your mentor at the end of your agreed, say, 6 sessions over 12 months. And you might find that there's a natural progression to that, and that actually you've at 6 sessions and 12 months you're kind of done, and that's lovely, and you say thank you and move on. Equally, you might get to that sort of allegedly final session and go, you know what, we could do with another extra 2 sessions here, couldn't we, just to finish some stuff off. And I think that's perfectly reasonable for you to negotiate that. I would just be careful, though, that you aren't getting attached. The point about mentorship is that the mentor is developing your independence and developing your autonomy around leading your learning. So there might be a good reason that you might need an extra couple of sessions after 12 months, but just be careful that you're not just getting attached to that particular person. Just checking that I've do you have to select a mentor outside of your institution? I would say ideally yes. I mean, I do support mentoring schemes that are organisationally orientated, so therefore mentors and mentees are matched with people in the same organisation. And I do promote developmental mentoring as part of that, i.e. objectivity and independence. But I think that the advantage you have of nominating somebody outside of your institution is that you are getting a fresh pair of eyes and ears about your own thinking and your own situation, which I think can be incredibly useful. Just looking at these questions. Okay, got another question here. Okay, more specifically about goals. Do you have examples of goals achieved? I don't personally, because I'm not mentoring anybody within the Academy scheme, and we don't actually collect that data because, of course, it's private and individual to the people. But there might be some information on the Academy website, actually. We've got some videos of, I think we have, I'll ask Kat at the end to help me out on this, whether we've got some videos of ex-mentees and ex-mentors talking about their experience of being on this particular scheme and whether they've got anything specific. But I think it is particular to the individuals, and it is quite personal in that respect. Another question here, what about getting a recommendation from someone who knows you well to get a mentor? Sometimes other people know us better regarding selecting somebody. What about getting a recommendation for someone who knows you well to get a mentor? I'm not sure I entirely understand that. I'll interpret it in the way that I think it's written, is that that's almost kind of like a referee, if you like, somebody who's kind of giving you an idea of who might be a good mentor for you based on knowing you. And that's not how we run the scheme at the Academy. But I think that sometimes talking to colleagues or people who are senior to you in your organisation, you could ask them questions like, what kind of a mentor do you think would work well with me? And that might give you some useful insights as to who you might nominate. That might be a really useful exercise in making those observations about what might work well for you. And sometimes other people can have that perspective on you that you don't have yourself. So that might work well if I'm interpreting that question right. Another question here, what if the mentoring relationship is positive? Could it continue for several years? Well, I know of people who've had mentoring relationships that do extend for several years, and they've become a kind of nice professional sort of touch point that people have with their mentor, that they enjoy having a kind of catch up with every year or so, and that's what it kind of ends up being. As I said before, I think you need to be really careful about getting attached, because this is a professional relationship that has a purpose and a focus for a specific length of time, and if it goes beyond that time, then the chances are it's becoming something a little different, and you just need to be clear about that as the relationship evolves. So I'm just wondering if I think I've covered all the questions. Kat, can I just ask you if you think I've missed any on our little question area there?
Sure, I'll just have a quick look.
I think I've covered them all. I didn't do it systematically, unhelpfully for myself, but I think that was it.
Yes, I think you have, and obviously if anyone has any further questions, they can call them on.
Okay, all right. Well, I've really enjoyed doing this webinar for everybody, and thank you so much for joining us today on this system. You've got all of our contact details on that last slide, particularly the Academy of Medical Sciences mentoring area of the website. There is loads of stuff on there that will really help you think about your mentoring experience, whether you're a mentor or a mentee. I urge you to have a look at that and think more about your mentoring experience. And I'll just hand back to you, Kat, now.
Thanks, Alexis. Thank you for guiding us through this webinar today, and thank you for everyone for joining us. Just in reference to the question about specific goals, we do have videos on our YouTube of examples from some of our mentors and mentees, and we're also developing future resources on this, so do keep your eyes peeled for that. We hope you enjoyed it, and if you have any queries or further questions, please do contact us using the mentoring email address displayed on the screen. Finally, this webinar will be available online in the Academy of Medical Sciences website in the near future if you would like to watch it again or recommend it to colleagues. Thank you very much.